Hi-de-ho, this is Tony with the Jeep Talk Show, and just like you, I'm listening to the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast with Nikki G.
Time waits for no man. So apparently time is a woman. Yeah, that one's going to cost me. Episode 46. I'm here to pump you up. Hello and welcome to the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast. I'm your host, Nikki G. I'm here to inform, delight, entertain, and educate you on everything off-road for the next 10 minutes or so. Why 10 minutes? Because that's about how long until Grubhub gets here. This ain't no Domino's 30 minutes or less. And that's a timely reference. You can follow the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. But never TikTok. TikTok is the tool of the devil. If you see me on TikTok, then you know my account's been hacked. You can contact the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast through direct message on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or leave a comment on our YouTube channel. You can write the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast at 10minuteoffroad@gmail.com. That's 10minute offroad at gmail.com. And there's no space in off and road. It's just one word, off-road. When I made the account, I couldn't spell. I still can't spell. And spell check wasn't really doing anything. Well, I guess it does work if you pay attention to it. But I ain't got time for that. You can listen to the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast on Apple Podcast, Google Play, or whatever Google podcast service is, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Cast. Yeah, I've never heard of these either. Radio Public, Anchor, and Podbean. And if you really want to help out the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast, tell somebody. I would say tell a friend, but after you tell them about this podcast, they probably won't be a friend anymore. So tell a complete stranger about the podcast or somebody you hate. All right, with all that out of the way, welcome to the show. Tonight I would like to talk about, or today, depending on what time you're listening to this, how about we just say in this episode, I'd like to talk about airing up. Now, we talked about airing down, and everybody airs down, and there's big debates about how much to air down and what's the best pressure, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Everybody's got an opinion on it. But I want to talk about airing up. Now, my tires that I have are rated at 60 PSI. I never fill them to 60 PSI. I roll with 40. And 40 is the maximum, usually between 30 and 40. 40 is just a nice even number that I can remember. Any more than that, and I feel like the front end is just kind of like bouncing all over the place, which it's a Cherokee. It's very hard to keep in one place to begin with. You know, the mere lines on the road is just a suggestion. But yeah, so I air up to 40. And I'm just curious of what everybody else airs up. Do you air up to the maximum pressure, or do you go somewhere in between? I'm not talking about airing up for the road. I'm not talking about airing up for trails and such and whatnot. And I also want to talk about what to air up with. I've seen lots of stuff. I've seen people limp to a gas station and pump up there. And a sidebar, just about every QT I've been to has free air. And if you don't know what QT is, then it's like a big gas station chain. Almost like a 7-Eleven, but I think they're a little bit nicer. I've seen people air up with their onboard air compressors, and there is a big debate on which air compressor to get. I've seen everything from the cheap $20 ones to the expensive $110 ones, and I got to tell you, I don't really see a difference. Some of the cheaper ones get really, really hot. they all get hot, but some of the cheaper ones I've seen get really hot. And they air up your tire a little at a slower rate, but you're airing up. The day is over. To me, I don't really care if I air up in 15 minutes or 22 minutes. It's all the same. I've seen people use CO2, compressed gas, which I gotta say, for the longest time, I wanted it. But then now I think it's just another thing to have bouncing around. And let's face it, I'm never going to refill the tank. I'm going to run it bone dry and just forget about it until I need it. And then remember that it's empty, and I'll put it on my list to refill. And I'll never get around to it. Where I pull out a compressor, I hook it up to my battery, and it's good to go. Now, that being said, when you wheel with people, not everybody has to have a compressor. You know, if your buddy has a compressor and you're wheeling together, you could work out a schedule. All right, you bring the compressor, I'll bring a set of sockets and blah, blah, blah. So you don't really need a compressor. You just need one accessible to you. Now, that being said, if you only have one compressor between the group and it fails, then you're all stuck not airing up, which is not the worst thing in the world. Because like I said, you could always limp it to a gas station. What I use to air up with, and don't laugh at me, a lot of these new Hondas and Kias and whatnots do not come with a spare tire. They come with an air compressor, a little tiny air compressor. Why? I don't know. If you have a blowout, an air compressor ain't going to do you any good. But most people nowadays have roadside assistance, so they don't really need to carry a tire. To me, that's stupid. I will always have a full-size spare in my vehicle just for convenience, because very rarely do I have a blowout. Usually what happens is I wake up in the morning and go to my car and it's got a nail stuck in the tire, or I leave the parking lot and it's got a nail stuck in the tire. And so a patch kit and an air compressor would probably do me good, but I ain't got time for that either. I just, if I could change a full-size tire in about 15 minutes and be on my way. So that's how I roll. And boy, back on track to air compressors. A lot of these Hondas and Kias that I've come across don't have a tire, but they have an air compressor. Go figure. And I found one at a junkyard, confiscated it. I think it cost me like $5. And that is the best damn air compressor I've ever used. It holds its own with some of these nice $70, $80 air compressors. I'm not going to mention brand names like Smittybilt, but it holds its own with those. And for $5, oh my gosh, you can't beat them. It looks funny, and you look like a cheap tightwad airing up with it. But hey, you're a cheap tightwad with enough pizza in your pocket but hey, you're a cheap tightwad with enough money in your pocket for a pizza. So, you know, I'm all for spending money, but I try to save it where I can. So I'm curious, what do you guys use for air? I see a lot of the, I don't know what you would call them, exterior, like the Viva Air and Smittybilt compressors that you just hook up to your battery and you stow it in your trunk or in your boot or wherever you want to put it. I see tons of those, and those work great, and I love them. And I've even seen people with the permanently mounted onboard air. And I've seen holding tanks made out of PVC, and I've even seen one built into a bumper before, which I thought was kind of cool. A little too much money and a little bit too much effort for my taste, but to each their own. All right, so that's about all the time I have for tonight. Well, that's a lie, because I have plenty of time. that's all the time I feel like spending with you guys. I've got a lot of things to do today. I got a lot on my mind. No, I don't have a lot on my mind, or I'd be telling you about it. Now, I don't really have a lot of things to do either, because let's face it, after I sign off with you guys, I'm just going to watch some TV for a while. But anyhow, airing up, just as important as airing down. You should do it. It's important. Or not, I don't know. Anyhow, until next time, this is Nikki G saying, wheel what you got and be happy.